Do you love your creative push? Consider taking 2 minutes to leave a nice review on iTunes. By telling how the show has helped you, you'll help other people find it so they can help them too. If you need some simple instructions on how to do it, head to yourcreativepush.com/review. Thank you in advance for leaving a review, and thank you again to those who already have. Your Creative Push, episode 220.
You just have to ignore anybody who tries to tell you you're on the wrong path. Actually, only you know yourself, and you know what you want to do, and you should just do it.
Welcome to Your Creative Push, the podcast that pushes you to pursue your creative passions. I'm your host, Youngman Brown, and my guest today is Sandra Busby. Sandra is a still life artist who paints in a contemporary style using traditional methods. Inspired by the ordinary, she strives to capture the playful light in glass and other still life with her paints. Feeling stifled by the modern way of teaching, Sandra turned her back on art school, shut herself away, and studied the traditional methods of painting. Her work has since been published multiple times, and she won her first award in 2016, and her paintings can now be found hanging in private collections around the world. Sandra, welcome to the show. I was wondering if you could start out by telling us how you got to the point you are today in your creative hobby, your creative passion, your creative career.
Yeah, I mean, I'm what they call a late bloomer, really. I didn't actually start drawing seriously until I was early 30s. So it's really never too late. That's one point I want to get across in this interview, really. I used to draw all the time when I was little, when I was a child. I think most people do, really, when they're a child. I used to always draw comic strips and people, and whenever I wasn't doing my other bits and pieces that I used to do back then, I was always drawing, and I absolutely loved it. And everything I drew, as far as I was concerned, was a masterpiece. Everything was worthy of sticking on the fridge. And it's amazing when you're a child, you just have no worries about mark making. You just put the marks down and think, wow, I did that. It's awesome. And I loved that feeling. And then I reached teenagehood, and of course then your insecurities kick in, and you start looking at other people who are drawing next to you and thinking, mine's not as good as that. Now I'm not feeling quite so good about my drawing. Of course, they were probably thinking the same thing. Everyone's different. But unfortunately, when I was a teenager, I just stopped. Which I wish so much now I hadn't stopped, but I did. And I did the usual things that teenagers do, turning your parents' hair grey and whatnot. And then when I left school, I went to beauty therapy college, and I did beauty therapy. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I had no clue what direction I wanted to take in my life, and quite honestly, it sounded like fun, and I did it. And I used to absolutely love doing people's makeup. That's the thing I loved doing the most, which should have told me something, really. But then I got married. I had my 2 children, and eventually I fell into working with him, with my husband. He started his own business, and but on the side I was trying all sorts of other creative pursuits. I think I used to make little compositions with dried flowers and things like that, which I just liked sort of making things, I suppose. Didn't keep that up very long. My husband was a fisherman, a fly fisherman, still is. And I used to tie his flies for him. I had a little go at tying his flies. I quite enjoyed that. So I was always trying to do something creative, but, it never occurred to me that, I should pick up a pencil again. It just didn't enter my head at all. And I mean, I tried as well to write a novel. I've always loved writing. That was a really strong passion of mine. I loved writing. When I was at school, I loved writing. I used to write diaries. I was always writing, and I really enjoyed that. But having 2 small children, trying to write a novel with one child attached to your leg and the other attached to your boob, it's quite distracting. It was never going to work. It was never going to happen.
Yeah.
So that sort of went out the window. And then my daughter, when she turned, I suppose she must have been about 5 or 6, and she fell in love with a Little Mermaid. And I decided that I was going to turn her bedroom into one huge underwater mural, one huge underwater scene, and absolutely everything in her room was to do with, it was all matching the walls and whatnot. And I basically just using normal emulsion paint I looked at one of her books. She had a little mermaid book. It was just 2-dimensional drawings of the characters, obviously. And I basically copied those drawings onto the wall. But I found that I wanted to make it a bit more realistic. So I was making these 2-dimensional drawings into 3-dimensional characters on her bedroom wall. And I was so surprised as I was doing it. And I was so surprised at how, I was making these flat characters into these 3-dimensional forms on the wall. And I was fascinated by that. And actually, when I actually had finished this mural, I stood back and I thought, wow, I did this. I'm really good at this, actually. I was so surprised. I really surprised myself, and she loved it and I loved it. But I still didn't do it again after. Actually, that's a lie. I did a mural for my son, a couple of murals for my nephews and bits and pieces. So I was kind of dabbling at that point. Still didn't sort of occur to me to go into art in any serious way at all. But then I was in my very early 30s, and I just had this need to do something. And I sort of established at that time, I think I do is drawing that I want to do. And I bought this sketchbook, and I bought the pencils and sketchbook, and I bought it back. And, it was 6 months before I opened that book, because I was absolutely terrified to spoil the pages. And when I look back now, I just think, wow, that was such a waste of time. 6 months. How much can you learn in 6 months of drawing? And I was too worried to spoil the pages, which is silly, really, because I could draw a bit, So that was a real shame. But anyway, once I opened my sketchbook, I got the bug, and I decided, right, I'm gonna join a local art group just to brush up on my skills, which I did. It was just on a Wednesday afternoon. I used to pop along, and again, it was just something I absolutely loved doing. And I thought, I really, the more I did it, the more I learned, the more I wanted to learn. So, and while I was doing that, I think around that point, it was when my daughter left home, and honestly, I was absolutely devastated. I was just so sad and so upset that she'd gone, and that was the first time in my life that I had actually, I felt compelled to pick up a paintbrush. I just really felt like I needed to. It was a real urge, and that was the first time I'd ever felt that. And I basically painted her. I painted my daughter with this huge smile across her face, and it was like therapy at the time. And quite honestly, I thought, wow, this isn't bad. Of course, looking back, it really was. But, it made me realise that actually I could paint the world however I wanted to paint it. If I wanted to paint something, or someone smiling, that's what I could do. You can paint the world how you like. And I loved that feeling. I absolutely loved that feeling. So I knew at that moment that I was never going to stop painting. And I decided then at that point that if I wanted to be a real, in quotes, artist, then surely I've got to go to art college and get a piece of paper that actually allows me to call myself that. But, so I decided to enroll in my art college at the time, which was a pretty bad experience, actually.
Well, yeah, and before we get into that, I think that we just have to go back to the idea of spoiling the pages. I think that's something that holds a lot of people back for whatever kind of your creative pursuit is, like just writing words on a page or playing notes from your musical instrument, whatever it is. It's like this idea of it not being good enough to put out into the universe. And I think that it's fine to spoil the pages. Like, that's what it's there for. That's what a blank page is there for, is that kind of learning experience of messing up. It's totally fine to learn. That's what that piece of paper is there for, is for you to screw up and get better, or to create something that you think is the bee's knees, something that you think is like amazing, and then to look back to like 2 years later as you've progressed, and to look back to and be like, wow, I guess I wasn't that good, but look at me now.
Well, yeah, but it's partly the reason you're good now is because you did all of those bad drawings and sketches and whatever. And I just sort of look at my sketchbooks now, and I think, I could be looking through 100 blank pages here, or I could be looking through 100 pages of doodles and rubbish, but I know which one's more interesting to look at.
Absolutely.
And I mean, I've sketched things, everything from an empty Mars bar wrapper on a train because I was bored, and a bit of text next to it saying how much the Mars bar was, which I thought was a rip-off at the train station, and all this just garbage, really. But I look back at that stuff, and it takes you right back to where you were when you drew it. And quite honestly, you don't have to show anyone. If you're that worried, get a ring binder. You can pull the pages out. And I was scared of sketching because I don't know, if you've seen my art, you'll probably see that I'm quite pedantic. I've always hated the words loosen up because my tutor used to use that constantly, and actually I know that that's not really in my nature to loosen up with a paintbrush. It's just not who I am. But actually sketching is a different thing, and that I think is where I found the problem. You do need to forget about perfection, forget about the end result. You've got to just make marks and see where it takes you, And I'm doing a lot of that at the moment because I did neglect sketching for a long, long time. And just recently, actually, I've been going into my art studio an hour before work. So getting up an hour earlier and going in an hour before work just to sketch, because otherwise I know that you've got to find time somewhere. Where there's a will, there's a way.
You mentioned that in the Facebook group as well, the idea of going to work earlier. Is that a different thing than maybe staying at home and waking up earlier and staying at home and drawing for an hour? Like, does that put you kind of in a different atmosphere where you're like, all right, I got nothing else to do but to kind of draw?
Well, I'm really lucky. My husband, I work from home basically, but I work outside. So the office I do my day job in is basically a converted garage, and it's an office with all the phones and whatnot. So that's where I am. But my husband, he built my art studio onto the back of my office so that when I'm quiet at work, I can go in there and do my painting and whatnot. And yeah, I can draw indoors, and it doesn't really make any difference where you are. It's just that time before work. What I used to do is I used to get up in the morning. I used to have an hour to myself because I live at home with my husband and my son, and, both noisy. A dog, again, noisy. And in the mornings, it was just that 1 hour before work I used to call my own, where I could just, relax, have my coffee, watch my favourite TV show and whatnot. And I used to enjoy that hour. But, it was only when I was looking back on one of my, because I get frustrated because I paint as much as I can. And that's the first priority is getting my paintings done. But actually drawing is the foundation to everything. And if you neglect that too much, it's very different mapping out outlines for a painting and angles and all the rest of it than just drawing for the fun of drawing and the pleasure of drawing, And I just found that just getting up in the morning and watching TV, I just thought, actually, I could be drawing now, really. I could be drawing now. And so I decided, actually, no, I'm just gonna go into the art studio, which is basically outside my back door across the driveway, go into my art studio, spend an hour in there, and then go to work. And I can tell you, I have filled up more sketchbook pages in my book in the last month than I have probably in the last year. It's incredible how just that 1 hour a day and the improvement that you feel, and that, it's incredible, really. And I always think there has to be a time somewhere in your day that you can think, okay, I'm doing this, but is this TV show that important to me? Not really. It isn't really. Do you know what I mean? And I've heard you talk about the same thing, where you used to be into your films and Netflix and all the rest of it. And
loved it.
Yeah. And it's a time suck, isn't it? And
Sure.
The trouble is with films and TV and all that is you spend all this time watching all these fake lives on the telly, and it stops you living your own real one. In a way, as good as it is to watch these other things, sometimes you kind of need to step back and think, actually, I need to be getting on with my own life rather than watching I mean, mine's Modern Family. I love it. I know it's my guilty pleasure. Modern Family. I just love that TV show. My husband hates it, so
it's a good one.
So I used to watch it before work. But no, I just sketching is just important, and I can tell you that when I go into work now, I don't feel nearly as frustrated sitting there resenting the time I'm doing that when I should be doing this, because I've already done it. I've scratched my creative itch before I even start my day. And then obviously the painting and that I carry on doing as I normally would, but I've got that other thing going as well, which I'm not going to stop that now. That's me. I'm going to be sketching every day, and my plan is to just keep doing it and just look back on the first page to the last when I get through this massive sketchbook I've got, and just see how it's evolved.
Absolutely. Yeah, we got a lot of things working with us now. One of them is that the idea of just a little bit of time every single day, the massive amount of work that you can put in, the massive amount of progress that you can make. And the second thing is getting to your creative passion, like right when you wake up or like right before you go to work, as opposed to like thinking about it all day and being like, I can't wait to get to it, and then being burnt out when you get to it. It can be much trickier to get to. And the third thing is that idea of, like you said, I've been there so much, and that's the whole reason for the podcast, is the idea of, you're sitting there watching a TV show and you just get that idea of, yeah, I could be writing my own story, or yeah, I could be doing my own painting. I could be drawing right now. I could be doing fill in the blank, whatever it is. You get that kind of flicker in your head. Yeah, I could be a producer instead of a consumer right now. And you kind of just brush it off and you just keep watching. And I think that when you get that trigger in your head, when you get that notion in your head where you're like, oh, I could actually just hit pause, watch this later, and create something myself, that is the signal. Whenever you get that, you just got to do it. You just got to hit pause and get to work.
And it's tricky. You've got to find when you're feeling most creative in the day as well. I mean, I know everybody has their different, a different time in the day where they feel them. I mean, I know people that paint at night, late at night, because that's when they feel creative. I feel most creative in the morning, so I'm kind of lucky. It fits in with my day quite nicely, getting up an hour earlier and just doing it. But I just find that just do it, and don't be scared of anything bad. If you create something bad, just see it as a stepping stone to something that's going to be great. That's the way to look at it, and just get on with it. Just do it. Yeah, I think find when you're feeling most creative, and if you can find a slot during that time in your life that you're doing something else, that you're wasting time, just rethink what you're doing, because time, you can't manage time. There's no way of managing time. It moves forward. It doesn't go back. You can't rewind it. You can't pause it. It goes on, and all you can do is you can waste it, or you can do something good with it. That's my feeling.
Absolutely. Yeah, and we were talking a little bit before the show about how it's 4 a.m. where I'm at right now, and I'm a night owl. But I think to set the tempo for night owls out there listening right now, if you can, when you start your day, when you wake up, when you're not feeling that kind of creative buzz, when you're not feeling totally motivated, to kind of force yourself to get into it a little bit, whatever your creative passion is, to just a little bit, dabble in it a little bit and set the tempo for your day. I think it can change your day completely, because for night owls, we have the disadvantage of kind of waiting until our day is over, until we have a few hours left in our day to get to our creative passion. And I think that if you can get to it a little bit earlier, your entire day will change completely. It's like working out. You just feel completely motivated, and you feel like your day is kind of rejuvenated before it's even started. Definitely something to try out for night owls like me.
Yeah, and the hardest thing to do is pick up the pencil or the pen or whatever creative pursuit you're doing. The hardest thing to do is actually start, just picking up that pencil. I mean, I went into my art studio the other day with the intention of drawing for 1 hour, and before I knew it, 3 hours had passed. But sometimes it's just starting. It's just thinking, it's just squeezing the paint on the palette or picking up that paintbrush. That's the hardest thing to do. And once you start, it's amazing how quickly time will pass, and how much you will get done, even if you just force yourself to walk in your studio and clean your brushes, or pick up your guitar and, play a few chords. Just start playing a little bit, and it's surprising where it can take you. You know, even if you pretend to yourself, you just have to pretend to yourself you're going in to do 10 minutes. Usually, I mean, I don't know of a time when I've literally done 10 minutes. It's always escalated into a long time. You know, it's just starting.
Going along with that, you had this blog post that I found really motivational about avoiding procrastination, because that's something that we all kind of deal with. Yeah. But you had a lot of great points in it, but one I really wanted to touch on was the idea of having a whiteboard on the wall. Can you talk about that a little bit?
So quite often I come up with just a random idea, and it can be when I'm doing the most bizarre thing.
Yeah.
So I'll have an inspiration. I'll think, I really want to paint that. But then by the time, you know, it comes to it, I've forgotten all about that idea, and, you know, and then I'll come to some, you know, great artist block and feel, I don't know what to paint. You know, I've got no idea what I want to do. So what I did is I got a whiteboard, you know, a white clean board that I just put on my studio wall. And every time that I came up with an idea, funny enough, usually it's when I'm walking around the woods with the dog. I think it's when my head is empty, completely empty, things will filter in, and I'll start thinking of something. Actually, I was cleaning the toilet the other day. That's when I got the inspiration for my latest painting. I'm not going to go into that now.
Thank you for that.
But I was just cleaning the loo, and this idea came into my head, and it's surprising where these ideas happen. But it's making sure that you don't just let them come in to your mind and then filter out again before you've written them down. It's so important to write them down. So I have now a whiteboard on my wall, and it's got a list of various things that have, you know, I thought, I really want to paint this. Some of them I'll never paint, because perhaps by the time I get round to it, I don't like that idea anymore. But actually, I would say most of them end up on a panel of some sort, and most of them end up being painted. And I think I just forget things too easily. You know, I'll think about something and then it's gone. So by writing it down, I think you've always got it on the wall. It's in front of you. So next time you have a block, you can just refer to that whiteboard. I mean, I normally, obviously, if I'm out walking the dog, I'll put it a note on my mobile phone, you know, just, I'll write it down in there first, and then I transfer it to the board when I'm in the studio. But it's just having things written down and in view, not just in your little notebook on your mobile phone, but actually on a wall. It can be surprising how inspiring that can be, just looking through and thinking, I'd forgotten about that. You know, I forgot I wanted to paint that. Yeah, I'm going to try that today. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think you hit on one of the most important things for creative people, because I think that if you're a creative person, you have this superpower almost, like not superpower, but you get this kind of gift from the universe when you get an idea, and when you let it slip away, it's like a complete disservice to like your superpower. And
I love that superpower.
Yeah, absolutely. It really is, because sometimes they're gifts, but sometimes they're coal and they're not good, but at least you were able to kind of write it down, get it out of your brain and onto the paper to evaluate it later when you can kind of make sense of it. But sometimes there's gems in there that you will just let slip away if you don't write it down. So to find a way to write it down, doesn't have to be a whiteboard where other people can see it. It can be like you said, in your phone, but it's so important to get that out there of your head when you get those spurts of inspiration, because they don't come often. So just get them out.
Yeah, absolutely.
I wanted to go back to, you were talking about your experience at art college. I was wondering if you could tell us about that, because it didn't sound like it went well.
Well, yeah, I mean, as I said before, I thought that to be an artist, like a real artist, that you must have to have this piece of paper to tell you that, and to sort of allow yourself to say, hey, I'm an artist, which isn't true really. But I decided, okay, I'm going to enroll in an arts college, and I'm going to get an arts degree. So that's what I wanted to do. I was so into it, and I felt I'd wasted so much time, and I finally knew exactly what I wanted to do, and I was going to be the best I could possibly be, and do all I could, do to get there. And so I enrolled in an open art college. And I did the foundation course to begin with. So you do, I think it was because it was an open college, you sort of do, I think it was 5 years or something, 4 years, I can't remember. I think it might have been 4 years. You basically do, the first year's the foundation course, so it's learning perspective, and all the basic fundamentals, which are really, really important. And yeah, that did help, definitely. But then I went on to the, second year. That was a real wake-up call for me because I really got to know what I was letting myself in for. So halfway through, I'd say, the second year, I was feeling really deflated because I felt that everything I was being asked to do was all about, lobbing paint at a canvas, lunging, being expressive, which is great and fine. I've no problem with that. But what I was frustrated with was I wasn't being taught to actually paint. I had not been taught the skill of painting, and I felt that before expressing and lunging and all the rest of it, I wanted to learn the basic technical skills, the old master skills, that kind of thing, the real proper way of painting. I just quickly realised I wasn't learning anything there at all. I spoke to my tutor about it and said, when's that coming? When am I going to learn these skills, the old masters used to use? When am I going to learn all this? And he said, well, you're not. He said, unless you go to Florence or somewhere. He said, even we're not taught it, the teachers. He said, we don't even know it. So it's just not taught these days. He said, you need to it's all about expression. You don't need to worry about skill. It's all about expression. Well, I wasn't particularly happy with that.
Yeah.
I thought I'd carry on. I'll just carry on. And I was doing meticulous, because we'd have tutorials and we'd have personal tutoring, lessons and whatnot. And then we'd go home with a mountain of various projects we had to do. And then we'd have to go back and get them, looked at and evaluated and all the rest of it. And, so I would come home and I would set up these really, I can see now that they were contrived, but still life and whatnot. And I'd do these really intricate drawings and paintings and coloured pencil drawings. And I would spend so much time on these drawings, making them perfect. And, and I'd take them back to him and there'd probably be maybe 8 or 9 things I'd done. And he would flick through them and he'd go, no, that is absolutely not what I'm looking for. And it was quite deflating because the amount of effort I'd put into these things, and I thought, I'm quite pleased with this. And he just literally, just poo-pooed everything I did, really. He was like, no, that's just not what art is all about at all.
Not what he's looking for.
Well, yeah, there you go. Exactly. I mean, I can, now when I look back, I can see that now I've been doing it a long time. I can see now that perhaps I was being too pedantic and all the rest of it, but a lot of effort had gone into these drawings. They were the best I could be at the time. And so he brought me I had a couple of tutorials with him, and one day we were drawing rooftops, and he was painting rooftops and I was painting rooftops, and he sort of looked at mine. He said, what's this? He said, why don't you try doing big, bold, black outlines around the rooftops? And I said, well, I cannot see. I've never seen a big, bold, black outline on anything in the world. Other than what's on a bit of paper. I've never seen that. And I said, well, I don't see a big, bold black outline. And he said, well, put one in, see what it does. And then I looked at his work and I thought, that's what you've done. You've done big, bold black outlines. And in fact, when I looked around his wall, it kind of dawned on me. I thought, yeah, this is your style. This is your style. And you're basically trying to make me paint how you paint.
He was recruiting.
Pretty much, yeah. And off I went home again, and I was really deflated. I just felt so frustrated because I wasn't moving forward in any way, shape or form for me. I was just almost hated painting by then. I wasn't even enjoying it by then, and I almost felt like giving up. Anyway, that night I had another project to get on with, and I had to paint a corner of my house. And having a young family, it was always hard to find the time to do these projects and whatnot. So anyway, while my son was in the bath one day, I thought, I'll do a sketch of the little room, which I'm in now actually, and a little corner of this room. Anyway, I could hear my son splashing around like a lunatic in the bathroom, and then he said, Mum, I've accidentally soaked the bathroom. And I walked into the bathroom, and it was like a tidal wave had hit hit my house. It was just, I was like, oh God, it's just so difficult to try and find time to do all this with kids around because they are distracting. But he actually did me a huge favour. That moment was a defining moment because I got him out the bath and I was drying him, and I said, you know what I think I'm going to do? I'm going to draw this room, and I'm going to draw it really badly on purpose. So I was doing it as an experiment. So what I did is I got this big sheet of A4 watercolour paper, A4, A2 I think it was, a big sheet. I decided that I was going to purposely do a really crappy drawing, something really, really bad, just to see how my tutor would react. So I soaked this bit of paper. I drew the outline of my sink, which I think I did as a blind contour drawing. So you can imagine you're not really looking at the paper, you're just looking at the sink and you're drawing. And so the perspective was all off. It looked like it was hanging off the wall. It was absolutely awful. And then I grated some brown pastel, I think it was, just over where I'd drawn the towel. And I'd sloshed a load of brown watercolour across the top of the page. And then I lifted it up and it was all running down. And I said to my son, Charlie, Charlie, what do you think of this? And he looked at it and he said, Mummy, it's rubbish. I said, yeah, that's what I was hoping you'd say that. So I thought, right, and I let this thing dry. Absolutely terrible thing it was. And in amongst all of these other intricate drawings I'd done that week, or that month, whatever, I slotted it in amongst them. And then when my next tutorial came up, I took this big folder, and he did as usual, and he was flicking through all of these really intricate drawings I'd done. No, you're still not getting it. And then he came across this awful thing that I'd created in the bathroom, and I did it in about 5 minutes. And he said, oh, this is exactly what I'm looking for. He said, you've got it. He said, you've got it. You keep doing this and you'll have a degree. And that was the moment that I decided, yeah, I'm not going to carry on with art college. If this is how you want me to do it, no, See you later. Sorry. So I left and I decided that, I didn't need that piece of paper at all. It was just in my head that I needed it. I'm not saying that art college is a bad thing for everyone. I'm really not saying that at all, but it definitely wasn't right for me.
Right, because so much of that comes from what other people expect from you. Like you said, exactly like he wanted you to do exactly what he did.
Yeah.
So from that point, how did you kind of find your style, and how did you kind of continue to push things?
So what I did is when I left college, it was a very big decision in a way, because when I'd said, right, I'm leaving, I suddenly thought, oh my God, but how am I going to learn to paint? The beauty of the internet now is amazing, isn't it? And I must have got 100 books, I think. I decided what I would do is I'd make a list of all of the things I'd wanted to paint, but I'd not been able to paint. And I would paint them in the style I wanted to paint them in. Basically, I just shut myself away for about a year from all of the outside influences. I was so sick of being influenced at college, and I decided I wanted to learn those old master techniques. So that's what I did. I'm not going to be looking at other people's art at this point. I just want to try and learn myself and develop things myself by just learning through books, which I did. And basically, I think I developed my style by ignoring everybody else, just by refusing to be influenced by anyone. And I think shutting myself away like that and just doing those, I started off with a series of bears. I'll quickly tell you the story of the first sort of painting I was proud of. I think Father's Day was coming up, and I wanted to try and paint a portrait in an old master style. But I decided to do it of my dad's childhood teddy bear. I had this bear sort of in a dark, gloomy corner with the light hitting it from one side and all the rest of it, just like you'd see an old master painting, but obviously with a bear. And it was the first sort of real oil painting I'd actually done. And I was really sort of proud of that. I mean, there's a lot I'd change about it now, but, you know, at the time, that was where my own journey, I think, really began, of learning how to properly paint. And I think I ended up doing a series of 8 teddy bears, I think. And actually, although I don't paint those anymore, they actually taught me pretty much, well, everything. They really did. It was just a really amazing experience, just knowing that I was, you know, using the right mediums. I knew what not to use over, you know, I don't know if you know, but there's fat over lean. There's all these different types of rules that you have to know about oil paints anyway, unless you're just painting in one layer. So I did know, because I had sat down and taught myself, I felt more confident after that actually now I know how to use oil paints properly. I can sort of experiment with a little bit more. And then I decided that I wanted to paint glass, because I was absolutely terrified of painting glass. That was the thing I was most scared about painting. And so I thought, well, I better do it then. So I started painting glass objects. And actually, I paint more glass, I think, now than anything else. I absolutely love it. But it was just forcing myself to do the thing I was most scared to do. But yeah, ignoring everything around me, being inspired by other artists, absolutely, definitely, but not comparing myself to them and not being influenced too much by them, because that is how you find your style. Just do what feels natural to you and just allow yourself to be inspired, you know. But yeah, if I'd have allowed myself to be influenced by my teacher, honestly, I don't think I'd be painting today. I really don't.
Yeah, one of my favorite books is called Ignore Everybody by Hugh MacLeod. We'll have that linked up in the show notes page, but yeah, it's that idea of, you know what you're supposed to do, even if it is the thing that you're most scared of doing. So you just kind of have to do it, regardless of what your teacher says, what your parents say, what your children say, what anybody else around you says. You know already, like in your head, as you're listening to this episode right now, you already know kind of the thing you're supposed to do. So just do it. Ignore everybody else and what everybody else tells you, and just get to it.
Yeah, and I think you know, it's so easy these days to pluck a style off a shelf, to be honest. If you rely too much on, you know, if you look at artists and you think, oh, I'm going to try and paint like that. It's fine if you just want to use it as a practice thing, but I think the importance is to be unique, and I think this is where it's so important to just follow your own, you know in your own head what you want to paint like eventually. And so work on that, ignore everything else, work on that, you know, and ignore absolutely anybody who tries to tell you it's the wrong way. I mean, I've had a lot of criticism in the past for the way I paint, because although I don't actually call my art as realism at all, I'd sort of describe it as a romantic truth, I suppose. But I mean, I like to just pick the thing I like most about something and enhance it, I suppose, rather than make it exactly as I see it. But I think that realism has been considered so old-fashioned in the art world for such a long time. And I mean, I've had my painting, my style of painting described as painting by numbers before, and I thought that's just so untrue. You know, it's taken a long time to learn the process, and you just have to ignore anybody who tries to tell you you're on the wrong path, because actually only you know yourself, and you know what you want to do, and you should just do it. Because if we were all the same, everyone painted like everyone else, well, it would be boring, wouldn't it? You know, walking around a gallery, everyone looks the same. It's just, what's the point?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's the whole point of art, is to be able to express yourself in that way. And I like that idea of, you know, ignoring the critics that don't even exist before you start, the critics that are in your own head, and then ignoring the critics after you've created the thing.
Yeah.
Are there any things that you kind of experience with that, like any resistances that you experience, like to this day, either with voices in your head or voices in the actual world?
Resistances, yeah, God, I'm my own my own worst enemy, really, to be honest.
We all are.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, I talk about other people criticising. Actually, the main person is always me. And I think, yeah, everybody feels the same. So, yeah, my resistance, my own inner voice, I suppose, is the first thing that will make that happen. Procrastination, it's a great way of avoiding failure, isn't it? You know, the painting's not going so well, I'll find every excuse why I can't possibly go into the studio. I mean, if my house is immaculate, I guarantee that there's a bad painting going on in the studio. I guarantee it. And also, the other thing is guilt. I have guilt in bucket loads, and I think this stems from having to be selfish and having to sacrifice time with family and friends to be able to do what I do. And I find that quite hard, but it's, you know, it comes with what you're doing, you know, and actually when the people around you love you, they understand. So, and I'm very lucky. I have a very loving family and a very supportive family. You know, I would definitely suggest as well, you know, because I think with balancing time and things, that was another thing, getting into how I find the time to go in my studio when I've got this family and I want to spend time with them. You know, if I had any advice for any want-to-be artist, I would advise them to marry someone that they don't like all that much, because it's so difficult when you love your husband. I mean, I love my husband, and unfortunately we get on really well, and unfortunately, you know, I like spending time with him. but if
I hear you. I completely get you.
And you know, it can be such a, well, it can be difficult because
temptation.
Exactly, and I want to be with him. So when there's a weekend and he'll come and say, "Oh, should we do this?" And a lot of the time I should be saying no. You know, I'm going to paint today, but actually I find myself going, "Oh yeah, let's go out for breakfast, or let's go and walk the dog up the downs, or wherever." You know, it's difficult when you are in love. It
Absolutely.
really is. It's hard. It shouldn't be, but it actually makes it harder.
That's one of the things I've been struggling with so much recently, is that there's work to do, and there's this thing that I'm so passionate about, this podcast, you know. You know, I need to edit the episode and get it ready for all the listeners, and all the listeners are my family, and there's this extreme love that I have for this thing, you know, and I think that all creative people can relate to that. It's that thing that you're able to express yourself in a way that you can't express yourself in any other way. Yet then you have your husband, your wife, your boyfriend, your girlfriend, your dogs, your children, you know, all these people that make life, you know, and it's so hard to figure out that balance of, like you said, it's that guilt where no matter what choice you make, no matter where you put your time, you always have a little bit of your mind on the other thing where you're like, oh, I should be spending time with my wife, or oh, I should be spending time with my art. It's such a tricky tightrope, really. It really is.
But I think I'm a better person when I have done my painting. I'm a better person to be around if I've got lots of painting in, and I'm a happier, just a better person. If I'm grouchy or whatever, it's usually because I haven't had the time I really wanted to spend on this painting or whatever, and I get grouchy. So I think my husband understands that. You know, he's very good. I mean, he's good enough to build me a studio on the end of my, so he's very supportive. He's obviously
good man.
yeah, it's brilliant. I mean, not many people can say that, and he is very supportive, and he will happily allow me to drag him around art galleries, and you know, he's very happy to do that, which is great. He does sort of, he's very supportive in that way. It's brilliant, really. But yeah, like you say, it's not just the art though, is it? It's everything that goes with it as well. It's the social media, it's the blogging, it's the marketing, and it's very easy to end up doing everything poorly rather than just one or two things really well. And that's the other thing. You might come in from the art room, but when your husband's sitting there, and then you think, oh, I've just got to answer this comment on Instagram, or I haven't answered that person on Facebook yet. And that it's just all part of it, isn't it? And it's really hard. So I try to do those things when, you know, he's watching the football game or whatever he watches, and I'll be with him, but I'm sort of still doing other things, you know, and that's the way I kind of get around that, really. I sneak things in. I don't need to sneak them in. He doesn't mind, but if he's watching a TV show that I'm really not interested in, that's when I'll find the time to go on social media and do a bit of marketing and whatnot, you know.
Yeah, I guess for me, I think the thing is just turning off the devices and putting them away and just being like, all right, this is my devoted time with you, Jess. You know, for me, that's what works. You just have to put it away and be like, all right, it's done. I'll get to it tomorrow.
Yeah.
Does that work for you?
Yeah, definitely. There is a point where I will turn everything off and I'm like, okay. I mean, if I'm going out with my husband, I won't be answering Facebook messages and doing anything to do with anything with art when I'm with him, because I just think once I'm with him properly, then I want to be with him really, not just half thinking about what he's saying and half thinking, I think somebody's just emailed me. There comes a point where you have to switch off and you just have to leave it, definitely. And I think it's really important to do that. You know, definitely you have to live outside of your bubble as well, you know.
Yeah, and the flip side of that too is that you had this other blog post, that the 6 emotional stages secretly experienced by artists, and the second stage was probably my favorite because that's the one that I definitely get stuck in the most. The one where you just kind of find stuff, you know, you just find like fluff to watch, or art books, or long blog posts, or shows that are actually related to art, or related to your creative passion, or related to kind of creative inspiration. Even this podcast, that could be something for some people listening right now, like this thing where you listen to it and you feel motivated and you feel like you're doing something, but you're actually not actually getting to your art. It's just like this thing that you're kind of listening to and feeling like you're putting time into your creative passion, but you're actually not. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that and how to get past that and actually start to push the needle, as opposed to kind of just listening to fluff.
Yeah, it's a difficult one, isn't it? That 6 stages of painting was actually inspired in the first place by a podcast, one of your interviews. I think there was I can't remember, I forget who it was, but she was sort of saying the first thing you feel is excitement, you know, what are you going to do? And the next thing you feel is fear and all the rest of it. And I related to it so much. And so I totally elaborated and went through every one of those stages and exactly how I feel at each stage. And
you nailed it too.
Yeah. I mean, it's really, really difficult. You have this vision in your head about what something's going to turn out like. And when you're faced with a blank canvas, it's just, you know, you just assume it's going to happen, you know, and it will happen, but it's never easy. You just look at this and think, yep, I've got in my head exactly what this canvas is going to look like at the end. And then you put brush to canvas and, you know, it's all right. It's going all right. And then after a while, it's kind of, actually, this is actually really hard. It's not coming quite as easy as I thought it would come. And my problem then is I'll find things to do it's procrastination. It is. It's kind of like, that is the stage where my house is absolutely immaculate. I'm a domestic goddess, you know, everything's done, you know, you could lick the floor and you know, it's so clean. And I will find every excuse under the sun why I can't get to my painting. And it's because I know it's at a really difficult stage where it's turning into this horror thing. I call it the skanky teenage stage, you know.
The skanky teenage stage.
And it's because, you know, you have this vision inside your head of what this thing's going to turn out like. And then you nurture it, you watch it grow, and then all of a sudden it just turns into something absolutely horrible. You just don't recognise. You just think, oh God, did I really create this? And it's pushing through that bit is really, really difficult. It's just patience, but you have to just make yourself go back in with fresh eyes. I don't know if I veered away from your question now, but I think I'm getting to the point. But you kind of just have to move past that fear, go in there and just decide, okay, in this session, my only goal is to make it slightly better than it is now. That's it. Even if it takes me an hour, just to make it slightly better. Any improvement I'll be happy. So that's what I do. That's the way I do it. I'll go back in there and think, right, I just want to make it look better than it does now. And inevitably at that stage, it does then look better. And then I start seeing a light at the end of the tunnel and think, okay, next time I'm going to make it look better again. And that's what I do. And then eventually I'll start seeing it blossom, like you see your kids blossom at the end of teenagehood, you know. You just watch them blossom into this lovely thing that you had in your mind. I mean, you never really look at a painting you've done and think, wow, that's brilliant. You never do. You always look at it and you always think, I could have done this, I should have done that, and next time I'll do this. But it is at least something you can be proud of for now, you know. And it's just going through that fear and just picking up that brush and saying, I am going to improve you today, even if it's just a tiny bit. Yeah, it's hard. It's really hard, you know.
It's super tough. Like you said before, it's kind of ignoring everybody, even yourself, your own kind of expectations, and just putting that time in to, like you said, just get a little bit better every day. Just make it a little bit better every single time that you get to your creative passion.
Yeah, exactly.
Sandra, before we let you go, I was wondering, do you have any things that kind of inspire you, whether it's a TV show, a blog, a podcast, or a person that you look to for inspiration?
Quite a few, actually. I mean, I have been blogging now for years and years, but obviously recently I changed my blog. I've moved platforms and made it completely different. But while I was on my old blog, I had a lot of people that I followed and they followed me, and over sort of 10 years or so, watching them evolve, you know, watching them turn into these amazing artists in front of my eyes, along with me, really. You know, we've all evolved together, and that's always been inspiring. Unfortunately, my uncle Danny, he recently passed away, but he was an amazing writer and a brilliant artist and a stonemason, a sculptor, just the kindest, wisest, most interesting man I think I've ever met. And he really inspired me. He was the one really that encouraged me to walk away from art school, and that has ended up to be the best decision I ever made. And he was the only one. He was the only one that I felt qualified to tell me when I was a real artist. And he did. He said, Sandra, look at this painting. You are a real artist. And I believed him. And I would never have believed anybody else, but I believed him. So he was very inspiring. And I'll tell you another one. I think did you interview Danny Gregory?
Yes, yeah.
Oh, you know, I love his stuff and I love his story. And, you know, I find his work so inspiring, and he's done a motivational video, just a short little video. I shared it on my blog actually a while back, and it was Just Do It, I think it was called. And he's so right. You know, you spend so much time ripping up pages, rubbing things out, you know, opening a book, closing a book. I find his work really inspiring because it's effortless. He just does it. It doesn't have to be exactly right. The perspective doesn't have to be exactly right. It's the pure joy of doing it. And that I find really, really inspiring. One YouTube channel I've just recently come across, actually, I think it's called Semi-Skimmed Min, or it's a YouTube channel by Minnie Small. And it's all about sketching and just how to fill your sketchbook. And I actually find that really inspiring at the moment. And actually, of course, your podcast, I listen to it every day. I've got so many old episodes to catch up on. And some of the people you interview, I don't think I've listened to an episode yet where I haven't gone away and thought, wow, you know, this person's just really inspired me in some way. I just hope I don't disappoint with my own 2 cents worth.
Oh, absolutely not, especially since you mentioned this podcast as one of your
it really
inspirational
is. It really
things.
is.
You've just won. You've won the podcast. Yay!
No, I'm serious, though. There is no other podcast around that just deals with people, just to push people, you know, and to get them past that fear of just going for it. There aren't any other podcasts like that. And the diversity of people that you interview is just fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. I love it. I really do.
Well, thank you very much. That's what it's here for. And yes, Danny Gregory, that was episode 50. If anybody wants to go back and listen, like you said, he falls right in line with kind of what this podcast is all about. Shutting your monkey, shutting that kind of voice in your head that's not supposed to be there. That comes from that evolutionary process of being a human being, shutting that up.
And he did a podcast of his own, I think, called Shut Your Monkey, which I used to like. I don't know if he still does it. I haven't heard one for a long time, but that was a good podcast as well. Just to shut the voices out of your head. It's really good.
They're hard to shut up, but anything you can do to try.
They really are hard to shut up.
We'll have everything that you just mentioned linked up at the show notes page at yourcreativepush.com/Sandra Busby. Sandra, it is time for the final push, and this is where I ask you to reach to the microphone, grab the shoulder of one of the listeners that you've already really inspired today, and just give them your best words of advice and just push them to pursue their creative passion.
Okay, I've been practicing this with my hairbrush.
Yes.
And I'm not going to touch the shoulder of anyone. I'm going to slam them against the wall and tell them.
Yes.
Because the most important thing to remember is that to be good at something, the first thing you've got to be willing to do is to be bad at it. That is the thing people got to realise. You can't, every artist who you are inspired by, they didn't just pick up a pencil and create a masterpiece the first time they ever drew. They've been on the same journey as you're on. They're just at different points, and that's the reality of it. You've just got to be willing to look at your work and think, God, that's absolutely crap, but I'm going to make it better. That's the most important thing. Don't compare yourself to any other artists. Be inspired by them, but don't be intimidated by them. That's another thing. Be yourself, completely be yourself. Don't let anybody tell you that you're on the wrong path, or you shouldn't be painting like this, or you should loosen up, or you should tighten up. Just do what comes naturally to you. And just remember that every single bad piece of art that you've ever made, or every bad piece of music, god-awful poem or rejected novel, it's just a stepping stone to the good stuff. Without that bad stuff, we'd never get better. So just treat them as new lessons, and they'll arm you for your next attempt,
Couldn't agree more. Yeah, like you said before, spoil the pages, be willing, to be bad at it, like you said, on your journey to find what makes you. It's going to take work, and I think that you got to be willing to, like you said, spoil those pages. So
and just one final thing as well is just when you're looking at social media, Facebook, blogs, all the rest of it, you've got to remember that those artists have put up their best work, their good stuff, the stuff they don't mind people seeing. But what you're not seeing is obviously the things that they've screwed up, the things that they've put their foot through, as I've done. The things that they've their sketchbooks. That you don't have to show people everything you do. You don't have to. You can show people what you want to show people. Other stuff can be private. Just remember that you're seeing their best side. So don't be intimidated by it.
Absolutely. Sandra, thank you so much for coming on the show today and for giving us that push.
Me.
Oh, of course.
No.
You can find Sandra on her website, which is sandrabusbyart.com. That is SandraBusbyart.com. And you can find her blog at sandrabusbyart.com/blog. I definitely highly recommend that. She's an eloquent writer. Everything that you write, Sandra, really coincides with this podcast completely. You have so many, like I said, I had so many notes here from all the blog posts that you've made that kind of deal with this idea of getting past your creative blocks, going through these stages of making something. So I definitely highly recommend checking out that blog, subscribing to it as well.
Thank you.
Sandra, thank you again.
Take care.
Oh, so much fun, and my thank you again to Sandra for coming on the show. I can really relate to that story that she told about wasting time, making a decision to pursue your art and then buying a sketchbook and then not opening it for 6 months in fear of spoiling the pages. That is something that I struggled with, and the entire reason for Your Creative Push is so that you all don't have to deal with that you can realize that you can get right to your work and you don't have to make these long delays where so many things pop in your head that try to hold you back from spoiling the pages. And sometimes we can even lie to ourselves in those kinds of instances and believe that, by buying the sketchbook, we have begun the artistic journey. But until we start spoiling those pages, we aren't doing the work. All we have is a bunch of blank pages, a bunch of ideas in our head, and a growing, fear and disappointment in ourselves because of the fact that we aren't actually doing the work. And it goes along with that idea also of listening to motivational material. And one of the reasons that I cut this podcast back to 2 days a week instead of 5, because you can listen to endless amounts of podcasts and you can watch endless amounts of YouTube videos that are inspirational, and they can all give your brain that feeling that you are about to do something great. You're about to run that race. And it might actually feel like you're doing something great and actually doing work and moving forward by consuming all of that material. But you can get really stuck in that cycle and never put in the time and never get to work. Your wheels will be spinning and that can feel exciting, but you aren't accelerating forward. Like Sandra said, 100 pages of doodles is way better than 100 blank pages, especially after a long period of time like 6 months. The progress comes from putting in those bad drawings, and you have to put them behind you. Like Sandra said, you have to give yourself permission to be bad at something before you're ever going to get good at it. So don't be afraid to spoil those pages. And I also just have to mention that going to art college does not make you an artist. It definitely can help, but on the same token, not going to art college or art school, that doesn't mean that you're not an artist. It all comes from putting in that work and developing your own style, and art school is not for everyone. Sometimes you have to ignore everyone else and just put in that work and just find your own style. And that is simply all there is to it. There's plenty of resources online if you lack a certain skill, but you can find out how to do it. Stop making excuses like you don't have money for art school, you don't have time for art school, you don't have whatever resources you, quote, need in order to become an artist. If you have the time and the means to listen to this podcast, you definitely have the ability to become an artist. All it takes is putting in the time every single day, and you get to call yourself an artist. All you have to do now is become a better artist. And like Sandra said, that's approaching your creative passion every single day and trying to get a little bit better every single day. So my thanks to her for that advice and all of the advice that she shared in this episode, as well as in the Facebook group. Like I said, she is a big part of that group. And if you have not joined yet and want to be a part, definitely head to yourcreativepush.com/group to join in. On Monday's show, we have Andreas Price. Andreas is a super talented illustrator and artist with a really unique style and a lot to say about the creative process. You can find his work at andreasprice.com. That is ANDREASPREIS.com, or on Instagram he is Andreas Price. Or you can find those links as well as everything we talked about today at today's show notes page at yourcreativepush.com/220. But that is all I've got for you today. So hopefully you were inspired to go and get your work done. So go and get it done, and we'll be here for you on Monday. If you need the push again, have a wonderful, productive weekend. I love you all, and we will see you then. Bye. Never miss a push. Head to yourcreativepush.com/subscribe to find the easiest way for you to subscribe to the podcast.